Gemma Mitchell was a 34-year-old woman living in England. Sometime in August 2020, she met 64-year-old Mi Kwan Chong, also known as Deborah. The pair actually met at church and became friends very quickly. Now, Deborah was a widow that suffered from mental illness, and Gemma sort of became a type of healer for Deborah. Deborah was undoubtedly very generous to Gemma. As the pair became friends, Gemma told Deborah about some of her money problems and the need to renovate the house she was living in. Now, Deborah, wanting to help, made a very generous offer to lend Gemma £200,000. Gemma accepted immediately, but when Deborah thought about it, she actually rescinded that offer and told Gemma that she should instead sell the house and enjoy her money. Needless to say, Gemma was mad. On the morning of the 11th of June 2020, Gemma travelled to Deborah's house in Wembley. She brought a very large suitcase with her. The suitcase you saw being dragged at the beginning of this footage. She would spend 5 hours at Deborah's house before leaving with the same suitcase, now looking much more full. After this incident, Deborah would be reported missing, and Gemma would conveniently have in her possession a will that would make her the beneficiary of Deborah's £700,000 estate. The 26th of June in Devon, the body of Deborah would turn up. It would be found by some holiday makers in the area. Strangely, Deborah's head would be removed from her body. That would be found 4 days later, about 10 meters away from where they found Deborah's body. What happens next in part 2? And for more 7 Sin crime stories, you can hit that plus.
Sorry, what's your name? You Gemma? Okay, Gemma. Who's your second? Come on a second.
It's Gemma, do you want to come out? Sure. Alright. Hand to say she has. Alright, Gemma, at this moment, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. Okay, you don't have to say anything, but you may have a
This is part 2. After recovering the body of 64-year-old Mi Kwan Chong, otherwise known as Deborah, police began to review police footage to see who could have dumped her body there. And on that security footage, they very clearly saw Gemma. Gemma was arrested. As you can see from the beginning footage, Gemma was arrested, and the twisted tale behind what she did to Deborah was slowly revealed. And it was pure greed. When Deborah rescinded her very generous offer to give Gemma £200,000 for house renovations, she got very angry. She took a blue suitcase over to Deborah's house and, using sheer force, fractured Deborah's skull. Then stuffed her in a suitcase where it is believed she broke several of her ribs. Now, here's the truly sinister part. Gemma actually studied anatomy at university, and she very skillfully removed Deborah's head from her body. The 6th of July 2021, Gemma was arrested at her home. They searched Gemma's house, and that's where they found Deborah's forged will and the suitcase. And wouldn't you know, in that suitcase, they found Deborah's DNA. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Gemma, she did plead not guilty. However, a jury did find her guilty. This trial actually made history in the UK. It was the first time a convicted murderer would be sentenced on live television. And this is what the judge had to say.
Enormity of your crime is profoundly shocking, even more so given your apparent religious devotion, as well as the fact that Deborah Chong was a good friend to you and had shown you great kindness.
For more 7 Sin crime stories, remember to hit the plus button.
Don't read the comments, it will spoil the very satisfying ending. In 1999, a 20-year-old kid was obsessed with this 16-year-old girl, but she wasn't into him. Frustrated, he breaks into her house and demands that she dates him. When she refuses, he kills her. And then he kills her 14-year-old sister too. Or so he thought. The 14-year-old survived and easily identified Paul Powell as the killer. Powell showed no remorse in court and even called the victim stupid. When he was sentenced to death, though, his attitude changed and he cried and begged for mercy. And unfortunately, mercy would come in the form of a legal loophole that switched his death sentence to a life sentence. Believing he was safe from the death penalty because of double jeopardy, he wrote this ridiculous letter to the prosecuting attorney, basically admitting to every single detail of the crime, kind of bragging about what he got away with. So the attorney just takes the letter, gives it to a judge, the judge looks at it and says, "Yep, there's new evidence here," orders a new trial, and immediately this dude is resentenced to death. And a few months later, this lowlife was executed.
These photos are not at all what they first appear to be. Part 3. This appears to be a sightseeing photo, and it was taken in 2015 in Alabama on a hike. The girl in the picture is 18-year-old Jolie Callan, but it was taken by her ex-boyfriend, Lauren Bunner, right before he shot her twice and pushed her off the cliff. She texted her friend the night before, "If something happens to me, you'll know who I was with.
True crime in 60 seconds? Let's go. On April 22nd, 1964, Chester and Dora Franzak gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, Paul. The next morning, a nurse walks into the room asking if she could take Paul away for some testing. Dora hands him over, and then 20 minutes later, a real nurse walks in. This is when they realize that Paul is missing. This would become Chicago's largest manhunt in history at the time, involving over 175,000 postal workers and over 200 officers and FBI agents looking for Paul. Over 600 homes were searched, but sadly, nothing came of this. 2 years later, Chester and Dora were notified that an abandoned boy was found outside of a department store in New Jersey. And a year later, they claimed him as Paul, and they lived happily ever after, or so we think. In 2012, Paul got his hands on some DNA testing kits, and he found out that he was not biologically Paul Joseph Franzak. So where's the real Paul?
This is why you shouldn't go for walks in Sweden. In 2008, a Swedish woman went out for an evening stroll with her dog, but never came back. Her husband went looking for her and found her dead next to a lake. The police immediately blamed her husband and sent him to jail. After a few months, the woman's forensic analysis report came back, and it was clear the husband was innocent because there was all this hair and saliva on the woman's body that was not his. It turns out there is a very strange phenomenon that occurs in Sweden in the fall when all of the apples have fallen off of their trees. Those apples ferment, and then hordes of moose eat those apples, becoming drunk and oftentimes very belligerent, like this drunk moose who got stuck in a tree. The hair and saliva of the killer belonged to a drunk Swedish moose.
I want to bring light to a person whose death has not been talked about enough in the Black community and just in general. So this is Kendrick Johnson, and he was murdered on January 11, 2013. His body was found rolled up in this mat at school, which is just completely disturbing. Detectives ruled this an accident, which is completely absurd, but I'll get into why they ruled it as an accident later. Detectives said that he went into the mat to retrieve his shoe and he got stuck and suffocated. His family did not believe this, so they did some digging on their own and hired somebody to actually check out his body. It turns out that he died from blunt force trauma. It is suspected that 2 white males that went to his school actually killed him because they were seen on video coming into the gymnasium after him. It was later found out that he was stuffed with newspaper too. He had no organs or intestines. I believe one of the boys' dad actually was a police officer, which is why this was so easy to cover up. His family sued, but that would never bring back Kendrick Johnson, and that would never bring actual justice.
True crime in 60 seconds. Let's go. On February 14th, 1993, 5-year-old Sarah West and her little brother Seth were being babysat by their 16-year-old neighbor, Billy Schaefer. While watching a horror movie, Billy decided that he wanted to molest Sarah. So while Sarah was sleeping, he went ahead and molested her. He then stabbed her and mutilated her body. It was later found out that he also shot her in the head and he bit her on her thigh and breast. Billy then put Sarah's body into 2 trash bags and threw the trash bags over an embankment. Billy was arrested and openly confessed to this horrific crime. He pled guilty to aggravated murder and was sentenced to life with possibility of parole. On December 2nd, 2019, Billy did go in front of a judge and his request to go on parole was denied due to the horrific nature of this crime.
So I'm pretty sure every true crime fan has that one case that stays with you for a long time and that you can't let go. Mine's Johnny Gosh. He was kidnapped from his paperboy route on September 5th, 1982. Since then, there hasn't been a confirmed sighting of him. They think that they found pictures of him tied up, and I can't put those on TikTok. They're really graphic and really scary, but you can find them online. And his mother claims to have seen him again 15 years after his disappearance. He seemed scared. He told her he was involved with some really bad people, and he begged her not to tell anyone, but she had to because she was under oath. Johnny's case is very confusing and sad, and it's theorized that he was sold into a high-ranking trafficking ring. Unfortunately, due to his case's association with traffickers, the Pizzagate theorists really picked up on his case, and there's a lot of misinformation. But the confirmed evidence and information we do have is wild.
Alright guys, I'm back with a story that is literally Casey Anthony 2.0. Let me tell you in 30 seconds why this chick is trying to pull the same shit Casey did. By the way, this is happening in real time as we speak. Megan Boswell is 18 years old and has a 15-month-old daughter named Evelyn. Baby Evelyn. Megan reported Evelyn missing in February but hadn't seen her in 2 months since December. Sound familiar? She told police she last saw Evelyn when she dropped her off with the babysitter. I mean, she's not even trying to be original. She refused to give the babysitter's name to the police because she was scared she would take off with the kid. Then go get your daughter yourself, you stupid idiot. As the police start the search, Megan gives all sorts of conflicting information. Police ask her to take a polygraph. She refuses, saying she's pregnant and can't. Lie. Then she says her mom took her camping in Virginia. Another lie. She leads them on a wild goose chase and is finally arrested and charged with false reporting. A tip leads the police to a property owned by Megan's family. Evelyn's remains are found at the property, which is Megan's dad's property. More updates are rolling in. Stay tuned.